Hello. So in this video, I'm going to be sort of informal. I'm just sort of delivering this like I would to a class. So I'm winging it a little bit. But I want to talk to you about two main things today. First, I want to talk about belly breathing, or what you may have heard called diaphragmatic breathing before. I'm going to talk about the issues of that labeling. And I also want to talk to you about some postural feedback that you can do to help with your glossophobia, especially before you even start recording your speeches at home. The first thing I want to talk about is belly breathing or belly breath. If you've ever taken a yoga class, or if you've played an instrument, or even played a sport, or just been active, you may know what I'm talking about. You may have heard this kind of casually. It's also sort of really popular on the internet right now. And the reason I want to talk about this is because in your introduction speeches last week, I noticed that a lot of you were taking really shallow breaths, or you're taking a lot of breaths, especially through the mouth. And although it can be kind of difficult to breathe through your nose during speeches, what I'm really trying to talk about is the amount of breath that you're using during a speech, and also how many times you have to take a breath during your speech. So the reason that I want to talk about this is because if you're taking a lot of shallow breaths, right, maybe because you're nervous, what happens is that the more shallow breaths you take, the more nervous that you're going to get, because your brain's not getting enough oxygen. You're really struggling to kind of get through the speech. So this video is really about how to kind of control the amount of breath that you're using, and also how to sort of use that breath to project your voice as well. So what am I talking about with belly breath? So what I'd like you to do is just take a couple breaths with me. I know this isn't a yoga video or a breathing video in that sense, but just sit where you're at or stand where you're at. And I'd like you to take a deep breath in, and just, don't think about it. Don't really, don't try to do anything, right? Don't try to breathe through your belly. I just want you to take a regular breath in. So go ahead and breathe in, and then just release that breath, right? And do that a few times. So just breathe in and out like normal. Don't try to think about anything. Okay. So what did you notice? What was rising as you were taking breaths in? For instance, some of you may have noticed that your chest was rising, right? Maybe your chest was sort of puffing up and out, and then decompressing. Some of you may have noticed that your belly was rising, right? So it was kind of pushing itself out and expanding. Now, your diaphragm is used every time that you breathe. So this isn't about like the right or wrong way to breathe. It's just about how to use your diaphragm more effectively for the activities that you're engaging in. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a couple deep breaths with me, but I would like you to put your hand on your chest and your other one on your stomach, right? And at first, just breathe normally and sort of notice where your breath is, right? So take a breath or two. So breathe in and out, and notice what's rising, what's not rising. So if you're breathing from your chest, right? Maybe you're kind of puffing. You're doing one of these, right, where your kind of chest is sort of going out. What I'd like you to do is try to breathe from your belly. So you kind of want your belly to expand as you're breathing in, right? Don't push it out. That's a different thing, right? Because then you're just sort of pushing the muscles out, and that's not what we're talking about. But think about where you're taking the breath in from, and try to get it so that you're sort of breathing into your stomach, right, and sort of pushing it out. So try that one more time. Breathe in and out, right? So the goal here is when you're engaging your stomach with your breath, right, you're actually allowing more room for air because it sort of affects the way that your diaphragm and the muscles in your body sort of contract and decontract. This also can help with relaxation, which I'll talk about in a few minutes too. And the reason for that is because you're getting much more oxygen into your lungs. Because if you notice, if I breathe through my chest, right, nothing about my body changes. I'm just sort of pulling oxygen into my lungs. And this is kind of how you breathe if you've ever gone running or you're doing extraneous exercises, right? Because you just have to take shallow breaths. Your heart and your brain are just requiring more oxygen. So you're kind of doing more mouth and chest breathing, right? But when you breathe in through your stomach, you'll notice that more of your body expands when you do this, right? So that air kind of pushes against your diaphragm and it just leaves more room for air to enter your body. So when you're doing this, you're actually allowing yourself more air, which you can then utilize in your speech. So what I mean by that is if you're taking shallow breaths, right, and you constantly have to breathe in between sentences, which I heard some of you do, that's problematic, right? Because now your body's sort of just trying to get more oxygen into it. But if you're breathing through your stomach and you're sort of engaging this part of your core, right, and you kind of use your stomach as sort of like an accordion or a bagpipe, right, where you sort of expand the accordion or the bagpipe and you kind of slowly release the air with pressure, right? This is much different than if you're just sort of, expanding, contracting. So you take a deep breath in with your trying to use your stomach here, and then you engage that part of your stomach, you can actually release air much more slowly than you could if you were using your chest. This is actually really common if you've ever played a wind instrument. It just requires less breathing in and breathing out. So this is something that's going to take some practice. And even as I'm recording this video, you may have noticed that I'm not always taking deep breaths in and using one long breath in between all these sentences, right? It is difficult to do. What I'm trying to ask you to do is to just think more mindfully about how you're breathing in your videos. This can be something that you do as you practice your speeches, right? Notice how many times you have to take in a breath. If you're recording, for instance, you can look at the number of times in your first video you had to take a breath, right? And try to see if you can reduce that number. A good way to do this is really just by taking pauses. Many of you, sentence after sentence after sentence, just did not take pauses in your speech. If you notice, for instance, the pauses that I've taken over the last 60 seconds have allowed me to breathe more into my stomach and through my nose, offering much more time in between the next breath that I have to take. Versus if you're just every sentence taking a breath so that you can catch up with the oxygen that your body needs and making sure that you're getting enough breath in between the sentences that you're using, then it sort of becomes clutter in your speech too, right? So you're just sort of noticing every time someone takes a breath. I will try to not be political, but if you remember the 2016 presidential debates, for instance, someone had to take a lot of breaths in between sentences, and it was very noticeable on the microphone. So it can also cause distraction for people at home. So try that out as you're practicing your speeches. Really, you can kind of keep a hand on your stomach as you're practicing. Don't do this in the video, but just think about where you're taking breath in. The other thing too, and I'm going to move over to the posturing feedback here in a second, but a good segue into posture is really about relaxation, right? And how breath can help you to relax. So for those of you that are nervous, especially, when you go to record speeches, I really encourage you to take many deep breaths before you do this. And the reason for that is because many times you might say like, man, I got to go to work. I have things to do later. And I've had students say this, I recorded this video 5 minutes before I had to leave for work. The problem with that is when you do that, you're just raising all your adrenaline and cortisol levels. You're just going in and hitting play and then talking directly to the camera as fast as possible. So the goal is really to get to the end. It's not about the speech. But that also means that you're probably going to be more nervous. You're probably going to be more energetic in your speech in a way that's not effective. So before you even start recording, something that you can try to do when you go into practice speaking or when you go into your session where you want to record, really just take a few minutes to do some deep breathing. And again, I'm not a breath coach. This isn't medical advice. I do have some links below this video for you to kind of investigate this a little further. But your breath can be an excellent way to just relax your body. So if you take, for instance, 5 to 10 really deep breaths where you're just sort of calm and relax, and you breathe in maybe for 7 to 8 seconds. And then out for 7 to 8 seconds. This can actually help calm you down. It can also make you more settled when you go to deliver your speech as well. So that's the belly breath stuff that I was mentioning in the title of this video. For postural feedback, this is something that it was popular a few years back, and then it got a little bit of flack for being sort of pseudoscience or not really legitimate. But then some more studies were done to prove that this is actually a really great way to feel more confident in your speech. So Amy Cuddy's video that I have below was the TED Talk where she really introduced this idea of power posturing. And in that speech, she talked about our body language, right? And what our body language says. So I said in the week 1 video, I think, I was talking about how verbal and nonverbal communication can really say a lot about how we're feeling, right? So if we're kind of closed off, right, or we're kind of down like this, or posture is low, this really puts off certain vibes about us, but it can also say something internally as well, right? If we're kind of closed off, or we're sort of making ourselves small, right? Maybe you notice that when you're in the classroom, you're kind of hunched down, you're not really paying much attention. Studies have actually shown that people that sort of make their bodies smaller tend to have more anxiety, or they're not as confident in themselves, versus people that, and you probably know people like this, that sort of have much larger body postures, right? They're just sort of, they make themselves big all the time. They spread themselves out on the couch. They always look like they're very comfortable. I have a lot of students where, they come in and they kind of take up 2 chairs and double space on the table. And they'll usually go to a place where they can do that, where there's not other students around. And psychologically, what's happening is when your body is bigger, right, you're kind of saying to other people, I'm, not just confident, but strong, and I feel good about myself. So something that you can do before you even deliver your speech is practice sort of body posturing, where you're kind of engaging this behavior to kind of help change the way that you maybe feel when you're delivering your speech. So for instance, if you were to smile, sort of purposely smile for the next 60 seconds to 120 seconds, you would actually feel more elated after that time. And if you want to test this out, you can try it right now. Even just thinking about something that makes you happy, I can kind of trick the rest of your body to feel happy as well. A really good posture, though, that you can do to sort of feel more confident and open up is kind of what's called the Wonder Woman pose, or the Superman pose, right? Where you're standing up tall and you have your hand, you can't see, but I have my hands on my waist here, right? If you do this for 2 minutes, a minute or 2 before, you're it's sort of like a psychological hack where you're opening your body up, right? You're feeling a little bit taller, a little bit more open, right? Take some deep breaths while you do this as well. You can even smile if you want. That'll help sort of. This sort of tricks your brain into thinking, hey, I'm maybe more confident than I thought that I was. And the reason for this is a lot of your bodily reactions is really just your brain making predictions about how it needs to react in the moment. So when we're small or closed off, and many of you maybe were sitting during your first speech, or you kind of had some bad posture, right? That's your brain trying to protect itself, right? Your brain saying, my body needs to close because I'm in a vulnerable position, right? I'm delivering a speech. People are watching. They're judging me. Right? Psychologically, you're trying to protect yourself. It's actually why we get smaller, right? Versus someone that gets larger with their body posture. They don't feel the need to protect themselves, which is kind of what we mean when we say they feel more confident. So if you sort of make your body do this first, right, it sort of sends signals from your body to your brain to be more confident. So when you do deliver that speech, you'll be less likely to kind of close yourself off. But again, this is something that's going to take practice. It's not something that you're just going to be able to do and it's going to work immediately. you may do this for your recitation coming up, and it just might not work, or you might not notice the difference. But I can tell you that the more that you do this, the more that you practice this, you'll kind of get into this routine, and you will, like anything else with practice, become more confident over time. So I really encourage you to try these out. I'm not just sort of saying these things for my health. I'm saying them for your own benefit when you're speaking. These are some things that you can do off camera, so people aren't going to be watching you, to just help prepare for what you're doing on camera. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I really encourage you to sort of try to be a little bit more aware in the future about the ways that you're breathing, and make sure that you're practicing these body postures too. Also, because when you're on camera, even if this doesn't really help make you more confident, it will help sort of train you to be in this more upright posture when you're delivering your speeches. So if you have questions, let me know. Please make sure, if you're curious or want to know more, to read the stuff that I've linked below the video under this announcement.